If you're someone who is looking at improving their running, or you're someone who is just looking at getting into running, today I'm going to talk to you about the mistakes that I made in the past that restricted me from building up faster running speeds and also working up to the half and full marathon distance. So just to put it out there, I'm no extraordinary runner. I've just been getting into it more in the past few years, and I've started to work up to my first actual marathon event, which is coming up in a couple of months, and I've got a 30K event next month. However, I did do my first marathon on my own at the start of the year on New Year's Day, where I ran a 3 hour and 23 minute marathon. Surprisingly, in the lead up to that marathon, I didn't actually encounter too many issues, and here's why. So in the past, my idea of running was always just going balls to the wall. I was running as fast as I can, trying to hit a PB each time. Also, when I got into the running trend, or I just got that bit of motivation to start running more or running a bit faster, I would start running too frequently. And not enough rest between training sessions and mismanagement of how hard or how long I was running for led to a lot of niggles that would actually restrict me from improving in the long run. No pun intended. Having a calculated and periodized approach to your running is going to be one of the best things that you can do to prevent injuries and to ensure you're getting slow improvements sustainably over time. So that first big mistake that I made was just mismanaging my overall training load. I was training too frequently, I was trying to run too fast, and I didn't really have an easy run or an interval session or a long run. I just had a run where it was either this many Ks, that many Ks, and I was aiming for this time or better. The second big mistake I made with my running was not really integrating my strength training to complement it. To give you some context, I had a powerlifting / bodybuilding background, and that's what my strength training resembled. So that was either 2 or possibly even 3 lower body days in a week where I was lifting heavy on squats and deadlifts and doing a lot of hypertrophy work for my lower body. A lot of the time this just led to sore or lazy legs when it came to my runs. Now, while strength training does form a crucial component in increasing our running performance and reducing the likelihood of injuries, we need to make sure that our strength training supports or complements our running and doesn't detract from it. Too much volume and too much hypertrophy work is going to lead to too much central nervous system and local muscle fatigue, which is going to impact each running session, which will therefore lead to a deterioration in running performance. Coinciding with both mistakes 1 and 2, we could probably say that the third mistake was my mindset towards running. I was someone with a powerlifter's or bodybuilder's mindset trying to operate as a runner. The shift that I needed to make that would have made this all work out a lot better was adopting the runner's mindset, thinking of my strength training and my running training working together to improve my running performance and again reduce that risk of injury due to the fact that I wouldn't be overdoing things. So if you are someone who's coming from that strength background, you're doing a bit of powerlifting or bodybuilding style training, what I would recommend is that you start to approach your training with maybe more of a full body design, or even just decreasing the amount of hypertrophy or high volume work that you're doing in your lower body training sessions, so it allows you to recover enough in time for your actual running training sessions. But when it comes to how many runs you should actually be doing in a week, well, it's kind of like asking yourself, how long is a piece of string? I don't know what your running history was like, or how long you've been currently running for, or any other sort of conditions that could impact your ability or do higher or lower intensity training sessions. Now, the fourth big mistake that I made with my running was my old school approach to nutrition. So I was someone who did a lot of intermittent fasting, and I just relied on drinking caffeine in the mornings. Those little amino energy drinks that you find in a can, could have been the classic white Monster. I was living off that stuff as a personal trainer, running back-to-back sessions from like 6 a.m. to lunchtime. So when it came to a lot of the runs that I was doing back in the day, which were usually around lunchtime, the hottest part of the day, I didn't actually have a lot of available fuel in my system. Instead, I was just using caffeine to mask the levels of fatigue that I'd already built up from the training I was doing and probably the lack of sleep that I was getting as well. So if you are someone who's trying to always run fasted, I can understand the feeling of feeling a little bit heavier and sluggish if you've eaten too much. This is where you need to think about lighter ways to fuel yourself. That primarily just might mean having some gels before and during some of your runs, depending on the length and intensity of these training sessions. It might mean waking up a little bit earlier so you can have a pre-run snack, or it might mean optimizing that meal that you have in the hours leading into the run so you're not feeling sluggish, bloated, or gassy due to eating too much fat, fiber, or just a high volume meal. So let's jump into some of the mistakes I was making more specifically with the running training I was doing along the way. As I said, I was running too frequently and I was always focused on running fast and beating my previous PB. This not only exacerbated the amount of fatigue I had, it put me at a higher risk of injury, and when I had strains, I'd obviously not go for my next run, or if I was silly enough, at times I would, and I'd make the injury worse. So to make running more sustainable and to run more frequently, you really need to dial in the intensity of each training session. This is where your recovery runs, your easy runs, your base runs come in together. You want to be running at a lower perception of effort. Let's say we're running at like a 3 to 4, maybe a 5 out of 10, lower given heart rate, and likely a lower running speed. What this does is reduces the amount of force that our muscles, our tendons, ligaments, bones actually have to absorb each time that they hit the ground before propelling us forward. I don't know if you started to notice, but the sun's kind of chasing me over the room here, so we're gonna switch up a little bit. Now, another mistake I made specifically with my running training when I was working on running speed was sustaining it for too long of a distance. I would wind up doing these long runs trying to maintain the fastest pace that I could, not only leading to more fatigue, again, just giving me little niggles and potential injuries that I wouldn't have encountered had I just been a little bit smarter with the way I trained. Nowadays, when it comes to faster running speeds, this is where I usually break it up into an interval session so it's more controlled. I can get a higher output on each interval with also having some rest in between and not just running flat out for 20 plus kilometers. In saying that, another run that I do these days to build my distances up over time, like I am doing now for the 30K event and the marathon, is my long run. With my long runs, I tend to ramp up the speed as I go, usually finishing on a faster pace. My rule of thumb in the past was actually to use these longer distances just to work on that aerobic base, and I'd spend the majority of that run in zone 1 or 2. However, now that I'm nearing these events, I want to replicate the paces that I'll be running on race day. However, I'm not spending my whole run trying to hit that pace. For myself, I'll have some slower miles or kilometers to begin with, and I'll start to ramp it up at points or even creating blocks in the run where I'm hitting a certain pace or staying within a certain heart rate zone or level of effort. Finally, another mistake that I feel like I made as a runner was making it a solo sport and always just running by myself. Since starting up my own run club, I get to run with a group of guys each Saturday, and it's nice. It's not like I'm trying to push to win each time, but it's a good feeling to push someone else towards a PB if that's what they're looking for today, or otherwise just having a little bit of banter and a good chat on a run. Running is a pretty cool sport and there's a lot of people doing, and it just keeps growing. So I feel like we definitely need to lock into that social aspect of running. Look for a run club, run with a friend or a group of friends, and start to integrate that into your training. Obviously, one of the harder parts with this is establishing what the specificity or the intention of those sessions will be. Given you may have faster or slower runners, if you're all trying to run together, it's going to be harder for someone, easier for someone else, so you've got to find a happy medium to work with. Otherwise, if you're like me, you may just have one of those runs in a week where it's just classed as a social run. Generally, I don't push too hard here because I know that is what some of my other running training sessions are for. Now, the final thing that I can think of when it comes to mistakes that I've made with running is as I started to build up the distances for runs was making sure that I was fueled during the run using gels, as I mentioned earlier. But again, just touching on the fact you need to start to pay attention to the types of foods that you're eating, because one of the worst things that you're going to experience as an endurance runner is digestive upset, either mid-run or straight afterwards. There's nothing worse than setting out for a run only to get a few Ks in and be rushing to find the next toilet. So in summary, let's talk about the mistakes that you don't want to make once again. First of all, if you're getting into running or you're looking at ramping up your running performance, avoid running too frequently or stacking too many high intensity or long runs. Secondly, if you are someone that is coming from a gym background, consider how you can change your strength training to support, not take away from your running and put you at higher risk of injuries. This means reducing the amount of hypertrophy work that you're doing and potentially the overall training volume. You may want to move to more full body based sessions here, or just reduce the amount of exercises and sets in a given session. Your main focus for running performance should be improving that maximal strength and power output, as well as having some exercises that could potentially improve your running gait. Now, the third mistake and what connects with all of this was my mindset towards running, and this is a common issue that people have is that they're all in. They want the result, they want to get it now. And this is why you will run too frequently, you will have too many high intensity sessions or long runs. It's why you're going to keep going so hard with your strength training only to wind up fatigued and sore for your actual running sessions. And it's going to be one thing that really slows down your progress with running over time. So you've got to build up that mindset or that perspective to find the balance with your training, given that you're starting to work towards different goals. Now we'll bring the fourth and the sixth mistake together here when we talk about nutrition. You don't want to be that guy that's going into your runs with no fuel in the engine and you're just running off caffeine. You should be supplementing with some form of carbohydrate. You may need electrolytes. You will definitely need more fluids. If you're running straight up in the morning, you may even need to get up a little bit earlier and have a light snack. Or if you're running later in the morning, day, or in the evening, just make sure that the food that you're eating before isn't too high in fiber or fat, so it doesn't slow down your digestion or cause any upset during your run. Finally, to touch on those specific running training sessions that you'll need, you need to look at incorporating some recovery and or some easy runs into your training. Now your base work, which can be incorporated into long runs, is going to be something that builds up that aerobic base over time so you can sustain running speeds for a longer period of time, so you can run longer distances, and so you can build up more tolerance within your muscles, tendons, joints, bones, etc. Finally, when it comes to running faster, don't feel like you have to do this for the full length of a run. You can divide this up into intervals over an interval training session where you're running at higher speeds and a higher given heart rate. If you've got any questions or comments, leave them below. The sun's about to hit me in the face again, so I'm going to wrap up the video today and time this better next time. Until next time, guys, see ya.